Hello and welcome. What I'd like to do here for a couple minutes is go over some slides about security, securing Windows Server 2008, and do a couple of demonstrations on creating group policies, different group policies, some security, and then we'll do application, how to push applications out in the server environment. So to start with, securing, and the objectives of this chapter are understand the security enhancements included in Server 2008. Server 2008 is like most other new versions of Windows, is more secure than the previous version. Understand how Windows Server 2008 uses group policies. Group policies is the really big deal about Active Directory. So we'll put an arrow there, understanding those, that how we're going to do group policies. What can you do with group policies? We can control computers, we can control users, or we can control both. Understand and configure security policies, and this again would be in the security policies themselves in the group policy management. Implement Active Directory rights management services. One of those things that sounds real easy, but you have to have a pretty big infrastructure in order to actually do that. What this does is protects an individual's rights, copyright rights to digital documents. Manage security using the security templates and security configuration and analysis snap-in, a real mouthful. What that does is takes some pre-configured templates and compares them to your security policy, how you have security set up in your policy itself. So it'll compare the two, recommend changes. You can apply the policy. Warning here is if you apply the policy is applied. There is no undo button in these security policies. And then configure security policies for client computers. Use a cipher command for encryption. The cipher command is simply the command line way to do encryption. BitLocker drive encryption, which I won't ask you to do in the virtual machines. Configure network address translation and configure the Windows firewall. Implement network access protection. And I have a separate video on network access protection. What that is a process where the clients are checked to be sure that they have an antivirus software and that they're up to date with Windows and whatever configurations. You can configure it the way that you want it to be sure that computers meet a certain minimum level of security before they're actually allowed onto your network. Security enhancements, again, back to the server core, and I think we've said this multiple times. The server core reduces the attack surface because it doesn't have nearly as much running. Expanded group policy. Group policies keep growing and growing for the good with each new version of Windows. So we have better control over the policies, the management of the policies. Windows Firewall, the advanced firewall is a true firewall configuration. You can configure it right down to the in rule, out rule, down to the port, or you can pick applications. So, but you do have lots of management control with it. And then network access protection, the security configuration wizard allows you to create a policy, create a template in order to be able to turn off the ports and the services that aren't needed based on what's actually running on your server. User account control, the thing that we love to hate because it pops up and says, did you do this? Yes. Are you really sure you did this? Yes. But it has made the system more secure. If that thing pops up and said, did you do this? You probably want to answer no, because if you didn't do it, then some not really good guy did that for you. And the BitLocker drive encryption encrypts the entire hard drive. Gives some security. We also have BitLocker to go now where we can encrypt a flash drive. It's a great way to avoid losing all of this data that we keep reading about in the newspapers. The DMZ, the portion of the network between two networks, the DMZ is actually an area on the network where you want to allow everybody to have access to just a few services that are available. Some we're going to put in there is typically going to be a web server. We would always want that to be available. And then the new categories and group policies, power management, assigning printers by location, which is kind of handy to be able to do. It says particularly for mobile users so that they get a printer that is near their current location. Delegation of print driver installation, security settings, and Internet Explorer settings. Internet Explorer settings keep changing as Internet Explorer keeps changing. And then they say over 700 new policy settings. So if we have over 700 new ones, we had a whole bunch of them before, and yes we did, and yes we do, and yes we really want to have those, to have the ability to control access to the network. Not real fun when you're on the receiving end, but when you're the administrator, then you kind of don't want people to be able to do nasty things to your network, like install viruses and malware and those sorts of things. The user account control, keep the user running in standard user mode more fully to insulate the kernel. One of the my opinion, one of the really big problems with Windows XP is people love to run as administrators because they wanted to install something that's really simple. You're already an administrator, you can install the stuff, rather than using the run as capability that was available there. In Windows Vista on up, we have this user account control, which we've had in Linux for quite some time, that can be configured in 3 different ways. That you have to put in credentials, that you have to say OK, or that you just basically ignore it. Don't basically ignore it, totally ignore it. Tell it, don't ask me, and some people configure it, don't ever ask me. Well, that's a great way to don't ask me, do you really want me to install this virus? Sure I did. I already said you could install everything, so be careful about that one. Administrator approval in an environment like we're running here at the school, administrative approval is required. You guys have already seen that in some cases where you try to install something and it asks for credentials. It's asking for credentials for an administrative user to actually install that particular piece of software to run that executable. BitLocker drive encryption prevents intruder from bypassing the ACL file and the folder protections, ACL access control list. It encrypts the entire hard drive. Introduction to group policies to standardize the working environment of clients. One of the big advantages, new advantages, things that really helped out with the implementation of Active Directory was the ability to use policies and to control what goes on machines. Except for many environments define the characteristics of group policy. I kind of go through these, and then what I want to do is actually demonstrate the group policy. Defining characteristics, settings are stored in the group policy objects, the GPO, can be local and non-local. We can have local policies. In the implementation of the local site domain OU, the LSDOU world, the local policy would be the least effective. It would be the one that's applied first. If there's any, and they call it conflict, or if there's any other policy that would override that one, it's the one that takes the precedence. So first we're going to apply the local policy, and let's take a background. Let's say that we applied a background color, a red background color in the local policy. The site policy maybe did a blue one, then the blue is going to override the red. Local site domain, and then in the domain we applied a green background. The green's going to override the site, the domain one. And then the OU, if we put a purple background there, then the purple background would be the one that would win because it would be the last policy applied. If we applied the green with the local one and then didn't change anything else, the local policy would be the one that would take effect. So it actually allows us to manage what goes on the servers themselves. The old policies are removed or updated for all clients when the group policy is updated. And if you want to force an update in the combo search run line, GP update /force, which forces an update of the policy. Sometimes they'll have to reboot, sometimes you won't have to reboot on those. Using security policies, we have account policies, audit policies, user policies, security options, and IP security policies. What I want to do at this point is go into a server and take a look at these policies, and then we will look at the slides that follow, which will talk about each of the individual components or elements that I want to look at here. Okay, I have started up or brought into the screen a Windows 2008 server. If I go to start, there in administrative tools, there are a number of tools here. The local security policy, again the local one. The group policy management console is the one that we really are concerned with. When we open it up, we open up the forest, and in this forest there is a domains link, and in here we have a single domain. We have group policy objects, starter GPOs, and starter GPOs are something that we create that it's a starting point for policies. You may or may not want to do that. We have an OU here, a domain controllers OU, and then a group policy objects. There are two policies that exist, the default domain controllers policy and the default domain policy. The domain policy applied up here at the domain. The domain controller policy applied at the domain controller OU. When we want to change something, the ability to have more than one security policy does exist in Server 2008. Not always that simple to do. And these, when I click on these things, it says that I have clicked on a link. The policies are actually down here in the GPO. See if I can do this. In the group policy objects folder here. So if I want to change the default domain policy, I can go in here, click on it. I can look at the details, the settings, the delegation, who it applies to, authenticated users, the security filtering of this GPO can only apply to the following groups. You can make changes here. The policies do not have to apply to everybody. But once you apply them to an OU, only the users in that OU are going to get those policies. If I apply to the domain, by inheritance, the entire domain is going to get it. But if I apply it to a single OU, like the domain controllers OU, then that's the only place that the policy will be applied. I can right-click on it and edit the policy. When I do that, I'm going to get a computer configuration, a user configuration. We get policies and preferences. Policies are things that the administrator imposes upon the users. Preferences are just that, preferences. You can change a preference, but much like a mandatory profile, you can change it, but the next time you log on, it's going to go back to the preference. So it's something that you may or may not want to do a lot. In the computer configuration with software installation, Windows settings, and administrative template, control panel network, look around in those areas to see what actually can be configured. We go into the Windows components, it goes on and on and on and on, a big list of things that we could configure here. What we're really interested in the computer area right now are policies. We have account policies, and in the account policies, let's stretch this out again, password policy. The password policies enforce password history. How many passwords is it going to remember? Maximum password age. How old can they be? How often do you have to change them? Minimum password age. 1 day here for this one. Minimum password age. How long do you have to keep it? The theory there is that if you have to keep it for I don't know, 4 or 5 days, something like that, then you're less likely to change it quickly. It also prevents you from going back to the password that you just changed from, because if I had this really cool password called password and I remembered, instead of 24 up here, let's say we remembered 3, and I didn't have a minimum password age, I could change it to password 1, 1 change, password 2, 2 changes, password 3, 3 changes, so my password is no longer the third one remembered, and I can go back to the password. Minimum password age forces you to keep it for some amount of time. The password length, how long does it have to be? Password complexity requirements enabled, disabled, and it's enabled by default in 2008, as you see. The password complexity requires that you use a uppercase, lowercase. In the uppercase, lowercase number special character world, this requires you to use at least 3 of those elements. Cannot contain the user's account name or parts of the user's full name that exceeded 2 consecutive characters, be at least 6 characters in length, contain characters from 3 of the following 4 categories: uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters. So you can force that simply by passwords must meet the complexity requirement. The account lockout policy is designed to slow down, stop brute force attacks. Account lockout duration, account threshold, invalid login attempts. What we're really saying is, if we have X number of, if let's say we have 5 bad login attempts, and this one says not defined, suggested settings 30 minutes, in a 30-minute period in this case, then the account is locked out for 30 minutes. You can go back and change this. Let's say that we want to say we had 5 bad logins in 10 minutes, and you want to be careful about these things, and then we can lock it out for, let's say we lock it out for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, the password will be reset. Before that, you have to go in and manually do a reset of it. You can configure Kerberos policy. That's up to you. Logon, basically how long your Kerberos tickets are good for. Local policies, audit policy, what you want to audit. Auditing is basically a 2-step process. First you enable it here, and then you go, and if you're looking at folders, you go to the folder and say who you want it audited for. But you can configure auditing here, auditing what goes into the logs. What do you want to record? What do you want to know about what users did? User rights assignments. Remember, we have permissions and rights. Permissions is your authority to use resources. Rights is your ability to do something. Deny logon locally. If I wanted to allow an ordinary user to log on locally to a server, which by the way, regular users can't log on to servers, I could go into this allow logon local policy, define these policy settings, and add a user or group, and go in here and add a user to that, and that would then allow that particular user or group of users to log on locally to wherever we assign that thing. If it was domain controllers, we probably would use, or not probably, we should use the domain controllers policy in order to do that. But you should scroll through here and see what kinds of rights are available in here. Now we have security options, interactive logon, the number of previous logons to cache in case of domain controllers is not available, but interactive logon, caching logons will allow how many times can a user log on without being attached to the network, basically. If you've got users that have laptops that are domain members, you probably want to be careful about this so that when they get out at their meeting, they're actually allowed to log on to their machine using their network credentials, and that way they can get their network policy. Do not require the Control-Alt-Delete, a number of different security policies in here. The Control-Alt-Delete is put in for a particular reason. It's supposed to shut down the communication so that you can't read the passwords, the usernames and passwords, using software, their keystroke loggers or things such as that. Here we have the interactive logon message, the text, and then we can the title for it. This is the message that users get when they get ready to log on to your network. I think the book says use welcome to our network. You don't want to use welcome to our network. Welcome to our network, somebody hacks the network, they're going to say, big deal, you told them they were welcome. You didn't tell them not to do that. What you've got to do is come up with some wording that says that they'll abide by the policies, and if they don't, you have the right to make them leave your network. Well, I think one of the last things I want to look at here is the IP security policies, Ipsec policies. And we have 3 pre-configured policies. You can create your own. Client, respond only, unsecured, communicate normally unsecured, use the default response rules, and negotiate with servers requesting security. Then we have require security. That means that if the other end can't have a secure connection, then the connection is just simply dropped. Request security. If you can have a secured connection, then there will be a secured connection. Otherwise, it'll be an unsecured connection. Another time saver is the software distribution policy. There are 2 different ways to send these policies. Close some of this stuff up. You can do it with users or with computers. So with the computers, it's out front. You get the shortcuts and the completed installation of it once you start the application. With a user, it goes into the programs, the old add remove programs, now into the programs area of the control panel, so that the users can then install the program. And the programs and features, we would go in to install a program from the network. Not any available here right now. We could go here, and we're going to create a new package, and this will be an installation package. Please note that where it defaults to is to the C drive or D drive, this in case the C drive directory structure. When you're doing a policy, this doesn't do you a whole lot of good unless you have those files copied to every single machine. What you need to do is create a distribution point, a share that's available. And in this case, let me get out of here. Let's go in, and I've got this thing open. I have this one, and on my RAID 5 volume here called distro. To create a distribution share, you simply right click on it and go to properties, and we're going to share it. Network share, I don't want to do it that way. Let's go back to the advanced sharing, and we will share it, and I like to share it read to everyone. It's called distro. Permissions here, the default, everyone gets the read permission to it. The thing that has to happen here is the users have to be able to read the policy, to read the installation files in order to get them. So we've created our share distro, and it's indicated as a share here. I'm going to close some of this stuff up. Virtual machines, as you know, got this running twice. Don't really need that running twice, do I? We're looking at the policies, and again, we could manually. We got that open too, don't we? We're doing the group policy here, the group policy management console, the default domain policy. It tells me what I'm doing it on. So let's do a couple of things here. First, let's do one for the computer configuration. Let's do a new package, and it goes to the default. We need to go to the fully qualified domain name. If we're going to use DNS, or I'm going to simplify it here. I'm going to go to my IP address, 192.168.2.5. So I should be able to go in here with the file name / 192.168.2.25, And with any luck, I have my distro share, and in the distro share I have several applications here. Let's pick Adobe Reader. I'm looking for this MSI file. I need an MSI in order to be able to do these policies. We can, in a computer, we can only assign a policy, and we can assign it. There's an advanced button here. I'll click on the advanced button and say OK, and as it spins around and around, I get this. This is the advanced part. This allows me to do further configuration on the policy if I wanted to. Deployments assigned. Published here is one of the options. It's only available with users. You publish it again to the programs and features portion of the control panel so that users can then put it on as they need it on the different machines. Uninstall this application when it falls out of the scope of management. If it falls out of this policy, that will automatically go away. You can do that if the users are doing something, logging on, getting onto your network or whatever, and installing stuff with policies. Then when they get off of the network, it's going to go away. Upgrades, categories, if we had categories, modifications. Security, in this case, we have authenticated users can read, and they have special permissions. Creator owner has all sorts of permissions. Domain admins have full control. Enterprise domain admins, but authenticated users, the special permissions can read and apply this thing so that they can see it and they can apply it to the machine. That is a way to get stuff installed without actually being an administrator. And you see here that it tells me where it is. If you do this thing, and I've seen users or students come back and say, hey, I got everything set up, but then it goes through and it says it's installed and it's really quick and nothing happens. Check to be sure it's not a C:\/ a D:\/ or something like that. Let's go down here. Let's do a new package for a user. Notice it's going to go back to where it was before. We'll go up here to the distro, and let's say that we wanted to put Notepad++ on. We go and pick the Notepad++ MSI file, and here we have published and assigned. I'm going to go ahead and publish this thing because then it would show up in the user's control panel so that they could put it on. Notice that I didn't pick the advanced. If I go to the policy itself and click on properties, I get the same advanced window that I had earlier. So we have these two policies published, which should show up in the user's control panel, and then assigned to a computer. You can assign to a user. If you assign it to a user, when you start the machine up, it shows up, the shortcuts show up, and the application's ready to be activated. I'm going to see if we can make these things work. I'm going to stop the recording and try and restart the machine because that's the simplest way to make these things work. You can try the GP update force, but typically computer policies have to be done with a restart in order to get them to work. Okay, this thing just got here, so we'll do Control-Alt-Delete, and I want to switch users. I made this user, and let's see if he'll get on. Name's Sam Spade. See if it'll let Mr. Spade log in, and it did. So it's applying his user settings. It's going to have to build his local profile, all the things that we love about, and it said that it did really quickly. It said that it was applying a software setting, so we'll see if this actually worked for these things. Remember, we did Adobe for the computer, so with any luck, the Adobe should show up when we get into the system, and with any other luck, what was a Notepad++ should show up in the user's ad. So while it's preparing the desktop, well, we're there. Okay, that one worked. We have the Adobe here, which we didn't have before. And if we go to Control Panel, haven't tried this, so we can only hope that it worked here. Programs and features. Adobe is there. Install program from the network. And I guess that I didn't get it applied to him. Back here one more time. Apparently what I didn't do was say OK at the end of this thing. So we're in the control panel, programs and features, and install a program from the network, Notepad++, which I should now be able to install, preparing the program, doing those things for the user, and this is the user, Sam Space. Setup was successfully completed. Go into all programs, and we have the Notepad++, and we can run it. So that's the way that you do policies in order to send applications to the systems. Okay, back to the slides. We'll go through this quickly. It's the account policies. We looked at that. Establishing account policies, account lockout. We looked at that, talked about that, and the different ones. The account lockout, more of that. Audit policies, we talked about those. User rights, we talked about those. The security options, we talked about those. The IP security policy, we did those. Active Directory rights management, we didn't. It allows protection of, as it says here, documents, spreadsheets, email, and so on. It's a little bit bigger configuration than the other things that we've talked about in these things. Security templates I didn't look at. You can do that one on your own. It's a matter of just following these activities and seeing and comparing your policy against what Windows says is the correct policy. Publishing and assigning applications, we looked at. The cipher command is simply what you use in order to encrypt files and folders. You do it from the command line. BitLocker, configuring that, part of the routing remote access, and it is a much simpler configuration than what you would have in Cisco. It's just a matter of defining an inside and an outside NIC, and then the outside NIC got an outside address, and you NAT from inside to outside, and it will then do that for you. The firewall, advanced firewall, allows you to do complete firewall management, and I think there's a separate video for that. With that, I'm going to stop for this video and get it posted. Thanks for watching.